All right, so today we welcome Sam Reynolds to the podcast. I'm particularly excited to interview Sam, as I had the pleasure of interviewing and actually placing him 10 years ago, which makes me feel like a very old recruiter. So he started his career at Thomas Swan as electrical maintenance engineer, before moving to an automotive ball manufacturer for 5 years, where he first got into management at a very early age. For the last 3.5 years, Sam has worked for BHK, leading UK drawer furniture manufacturer in Peterlee, and he's currently their engineering manager. He's also a famous rock star, which I'm sure he'll tell you all about as well. So welcome to the podcast, mate.
Hi, all right. Nice to see you again, Mark.
Yes, you too, mate, you too. So first question, I'd like to jump in straight away. What does it mean to you to be a leader?
Obviously, you know this is a difficult question. This is why you start with it. But I found this the hardest one, really, when I've been looking at these to think of. I suppose for me, when I think about a leader, I think about people that have led me in the past, people who inspired me in the workplace and probably nurtured us in the workplace as well. So I think what it means to me with a leader is to be that person that people come to you for inspiration, for help, to help them with problems, and just it's for me, it's important to be that role within the workplace. I think that's probably the most important thing for me.
Yeah, I get that, and like you say, I think it's being that person people can come to with any issues, isn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think obviously there's that many different aspects of management. There's the role, there's the task, there's the people, and obviously the task is you've got to know what you're doing, you've got to know where the focus is, you've got to know what direction the business is going in. But it's your job to get the people to come with you, and I think by being that type of manager where you are trying to nurture people and you are trying to grow people, I think that's what probably is the most important part of it for me. And that's probably when I look about what would I think people think of me as a leader, I'd hope that's what they would say.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we don't have to go back that far for you, because you've progressed at such an early age into management. And you know what? 10 years ago, it was obvious that was going to be the case. You know, you were and still are one of the best people, without blowing too much smoke up your arse, in terms of there's just something about you where I just knew this lad's going to go far. It was a spark, it was a passion and a level of intelligence that you don't always get at that age, really. So we'll delve into it, but getting right back to, pre Thomas Swan, sort of, the apprentice side. What led you to get into manufacturing? What was the situation?
To be honest, it was never really the plan to get into manufacturing. If I'm being 100% honest, I got into the electrical side just because I wanted to work with my dad's friends.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to work with them. I knew them, and then I went to Derwentsside College and I started actually doing it and doing the engineering and doing the practical work, and I really enjoyed it. I took a liking to it, and some companies came into the college and just started, like, they handpicked a few and said we want to take them on site and do some interviews. It's not really what I expected doing, but I went to site, and their maintenance manager at the time showed us around, and I liked it and I was interested in it, but I wasn't sold because, again, I was 16-year-old. I wanted to work with my dad's mate, so I thought it funny. So the guy got in touch with my dad at the time. He rang my parents and said he wanted us to go there. So then my dad just said, right, you go. Simple as that. So best thing that ever happened to us, undoubtedly, because it's the career that I've had so far and the opportunities I've been given within manufacturing have been incredible. So that's how I got into it. It was fell into it, really, fortunate enough. But yeah.
And I imagine quite a solid apprenticeship there, proper learning trade.
Yeah, I mean, it was excellent. Like it was such a good mix of people that I worked with. Obviously, it was a chemical site. We were working in hazardous areas, so your work had to be done properly. It was always inspected. But it was just such a good mix of people. There was a lot of people who'd been working on the pit, which is, when we talk about skills gaps and the difference in people, and often we talk about this with younger people coming through, those type of people, like, it was there. It was ingrained in them to be hard workers. It was like the ego thing in the workplace then was who was the best worker, and you just don't get that anymore. So for me, from day one, it was you work. You pride yourself on the quality of your work and how hard you work. Yeah. And I think that's maybe what's missing a lot of the time in apprenticeships these days. But for me, it was it was great. I learned so much. I was allowed to be a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, an 18-year-old. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't. They weren't. My boss at the time, he wasn't really. When I was there, obviously I worked really hard, but you know, I was a kid at the end of the day, and they allowed me to be so. Looking back at it, which I think is important as well.
Yeah, you must. I guess there must be an element in almost in all these people who have worked in such difficult conditions. Do you know what I mean? I bet you're scared to moan about a bad day, given what they've seen. I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, like the type of people that just came to work and they got on with it and they wanted to work and they always worked hard. And when you talk about working down the pitch and stuff like that, you just think, yeah, fair play. I'm not going to complain about being a bit cold working in the factory.
Absolutely, yeah. I know I joked about the start, but I know when I interviewed you at the time, obviously your band were doing well. I mean, was it always a process for you that this was a side gig and that could be the main thing, or what was the sort of thought process there?
Oh yeah. That's part of why I never really thought about. I never really wanted to. I just wanted to be in a band. That's all I ever wanted to be, you know. And we did well. We did lots of tours, Radio 1 and stuff like that. But I suppose it's a lot of work on top of working a lot already. And I think it's just becoming realistic. It got to a certain point where you think when you're 18, 19 and 20, you know, you that's just being in a band is fine, you know, like you don't have anything else in your life. But as other things start to come into your life, you just start to realize that it's, unless you are, and there's no money in it. So you need to be Rihanna or Sam Fender now to actually make any money in it. And I don't.
How hard was that though? How hard was dealing with that in terms of, I guess that's been your dream, and like you say, you fell into manufacturing. How hard was that switch in your head going, okay, that isn't going to be that? Because particularly, you know, you're doing well, you're on Radio 1 and stuff, and you must have been people in your ear saying, I'm, you know, your next big thing, and this is it. And very difficult switch to go, okay, that's not me now. This is my cause.
I think the first realization, I think the first time you realize, right, I'm not going to make it. That was hard, like outrageously hard. Yeah, I mean, that wasn't a good time at all. I mean, probably that was about. I've been in two separate bands, still in a band, but the first one that was our goal. Everything we did every day was to be in a band and to be touring and to be releasing music. That's all we ever wanted to be. Work was just a side thing. Just so happened that I had such a good experience of work that it set us up for the rest of my life when the band finished. But yeah, I mean, initially when you think that realization, when you think you've released your best stuff and it just gets panned, and then you think, actually, this isn't going anywhere. It's quite hard to take, I won't lie.
Yeah.
But, now, like, you know, I still think we're making some of the best music we've ever made, but I have absolutely zero desire to be in a touring band these days. I like my own house. I like people. Yeah. I don't want to be up. I can't make it past 11 o'clock on a night, so you know, it's not my cup of tea anymore.
And then I guess, like you say, making that switch and going, okay, this is me now, and you know, looking enough to work for a good employee in the job you're enjoying. When was the switch to management? Again, was that an organic process that just happened as opportunity, or did you actively go, I want to be a manager?
I think it was project management as such. I mentioned, so when I was an apprentice, all the way through my time, my supervisor at the time, a guy called Ray Robinson, who's retired now, he looked after us really well. The guys who I worked with were really, really good, particularly on the installation side. That's what always interested me more at the time. Projects, which always has been my key interest, as you know. But when it was coming to me coming out of my time, so I'd probably like my final year of my time, there was redundancies in the workplace, so there was less people. So I was kind of running, like doing the projects by myself, and then we were putting big factories in at the time, full chemical factories. And then just as I come out of my time, Ray had a lot of bother with his knees. He had operations go bad, so he wasn't in. So I'm just kind of by myself, really planning these jobs, big jobs, and I really enjoyed it. You know, like. I would plan everything like with all the control, but like nobody asked us to do this. You know, I was only 20-year-old. I would go around the whole building, everywhere there was control panels. I would make sure everybody knew where all the control panels were going, what cables were going to them, what cables were needed, and I just liked the aspect of planning the jobs. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I just thought I should really. I am doing a supervisor's job. Really, I wouldn't mind doing it, and obviously getting paid for it. Which is when we met.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, and I guess at an early age, if you're managing people who are older than you typically, and I guess to some extent potentially more experienced in years, I mean, how hard is that trying to inherit a team and going, okay, now I've got to manage these people to gain that initial respect?
That was very hard, to be honest. So when I went into AKS, so although I was managing the projects, I wasn't really managing people when I wasn't at all managing people when I was at Thomas Swan. It was just making sure that the job was as such that if something happened to me, somebody else could come onto it and know exactly what was happening. When I went to AKS was when even then I only went in as an electrical engineer, not to manage anybody, but people left and then I became a supervisor, and that was the hardest part. You know, you've got guys who've worked for 30, 40 years and are very knowledgeable people. They don't know me. They don't not that they don't trust us, but why should they listen to me?
Yeah.
And when you're talking to them, you think to yourself, if I was them, I'd be thinking exactly the same. And for all they don't say it, you know they're thinking it.
Yeah.
But that just takes time. I think you can't demand respect and you can't force it. It's just something that you need to kind of lead by example. You need to show that you're willing to work hard. You need to show that you're capable of doing the job, and you show that you know what you're doing. And in time, they came to trust us and rely on us, and I built a very good relationship with them. You know, and that's kind of what was my best thing, really, the relationship I built with the guys that work for us, because it was difficult in there. We were understaffed, constantly up against it, and we all had a very good relationship, and that's what got us through a lot of the very difficult times that we had there, to be honest.
And if you think about management styles, everyone's different. Some people like to lead from the front and do as I do. Some people like to delegate and so on. And well, for you, what works in that situation? Was it a mix of both? And what can you hang your hat on at that time that worked for you? Would you say?
Lead by example.
Yeah.
No, if I think now I'm a bit more experienced, I'm a little bit older. I don't think I'd maybe feel the need to do that anymore. But at the time I did. I wasn't proven as a manager. To be honest, I was proven to myself, I think, as much as I was to anybody else, that I was capable of doing it and being in that position. But for me, the only way at that time was just to get in and just to show that I was capable of doing it, and just get the trust by doing it that way. And it worked.
Yeah. One thing I'm interested in as well is I think you saw it less in years gone by, but almost showing a weakness, I guess. And it's probably something I've learned. It's all right for your team to see a little bit of a weakness there and a bit of humility. You don't always want the answers, but back in the day that just wasn't a thing. Particularly, I guess, as men, I guess, as well. We're kind of strong characters. Do you know what I mean? I mean, is that something you've adapted over time? What you would say?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been afraid at all to show a weakness. I think you're a human being, and I think it's often the most relatable thing you can be as a manager, as a human. I think I've had managers in the past who have just robots. You can't relate to them. You can't. There's no empathy there, and you can't really work with people like that. And I think I've seen that evident when people don't work for people like that. I think the most fundamental aspect of being a manager is being a human. And just being relatable. So yeah,
100%. And if you talk about key people in your life who've been influenced, you mentioned obviously going right back to start, it was working with your dad's mates. I mean, who's been an influence, I guess, for you, both in and out of work, George, in all these years?
This is the only one I've left blank. Obviously, I've just made some notes because everything's kind of progressed, apart from the last few years, where I've made conscious decisions and I know where I want to go and I know what kind of business I want to be in. But I'd say within the workplace, I've just took apprentices on myself.
Yeah.
Couple of months ago, and I'll go back. I mentioned before Ray Robinson. He was my supervisor, and he's a big influence on the role that I want to play in these guys' lives. I want them to have a really, really good apprenticeship, and I want them to come out with skills. But the kids, you know what I mean? I don't want them to. Yeah. I want them to enjoy their life as well. I want them to have a good mix, and I want them, when they're my age, I sound like I'm really old there, I'm not, but I want them to think when they're my age, to be able to look back and think, you know what, I really enjoyed that. It was really beneficial to us. And so I'd say probably that's because I haven't had that many managers, you know what I mean? I've only had 2 or 3 managers in my time. And so I'd say when I'm thinking about influence on how I manage, and I would say Ray probably.
And it sounds like your influence as well you're motivated by legacy. Like you say, some people aren't bothered about that, but you know, I'm the same here. I'm motivated by how people thought I was and am, and the influence you can have on people, I guess. I mean, that sounds like a big part of it for you as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think you always come across people, you know what I mean? You meet people again, you see people again, and again, I just go back to it's just about being a good person, isn't it? Like if I can help them, then I will. But yeah, I think a lot of the times I think management can be very, very overcomplicated. I think by being a good person, I think by making good decisions, by explaining why you're doing certain things, you can go a long way. I don't think it needs to be as complicated as what a lot of people try to make in a lot of instances. That's my opinion. I don't feel like I just feel like I get where I'd get by talking to people like human beings, by explaining. If they don't always agree, obviously that's part of management, but if you can explain to them why you're doing something and why the company needs to do it, you know, a lot of the times they'll get on board and they'll try. I don't try any wild management techniques. I just try and talk to people, approach people, and just work with it that way, to be honest. I know that's obviously not that groundbreaking and probably not what you want to hear on a management podcast.
No, it's not, but I agree. I completely agree with you. I think to some extent you can overcate the process, and it is ultimately, I think, being a good person is being a good leader. And I think if people can respect you and want to work for you, and that's what I've always been passionate about. If someone wants to work for you and walk a hot call for you, then that's the place to be. It is. You can overcomplicate it, but you know, because management is as hard or as easy as you make it, I guess. I think a lot of it is how you feel in yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think,
without a doubt. I think the more confident you are in yourself and your own abilities, the easier management becomes.
Yeah.
I think, like I mentioned before, a lot of it is if you get people who maybe promoted a manager who come across as confident but probably aren't as confident, so then they try to do other things to hide that and end up making, you know, a bit of a mess of things. But I think, yeah, if you're confident in yourself and in who you are, I think then it obviously come across in how you manage.
100%. And your route, I mean, there's two different routes to management. There's the apprentice, train, learn the job route, get into management organically, or there's, you know, now the route where people go to university almost to learn to become the management style. I know you've kind of gone back to front of that, haven't you, in terms of you've now gone back and done the degree. So, I mean, what do you now think is the best route into that area?
Job learning.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. And now I can. The reasoning for that is obviously the experience I've had. I feel like if I'd have done my masters when I was 22 or 20-year-old, 21-year-old, I wouldn't have got as much from it as what I did when I did it at 27-year-old.
Yeah.
Nowhere near. Because of the position I'm in the company, I was able to choose I was able to have big projects that I was working on and I was able to relate to the masters. And also got, you know, I've had apprentices come through, not just here at AKS, and I've worked with apprentices, and I've also been in a position where I've been recruiting graduates, you know, and the quality of people who have just come out of the time compared to somebody who's come out like a year or two, it's just so much different. And I just don't think you can buy that experience in the workplace. I just think someone spends 3 or 4 years as an apprenticeship from 16 to 20, when they come out of the time, you know in a year or two whether they're going to have what it takes. And just my experience, just people who seem to have got into a position of management in a good, you know, they seem to have worked their way through. Now, obviously there are differences, and for me, I probably haven't dealt with people who have come the university route to judge. I'm going from having graduates come through and having apprentices come through, and the difference between the two. You know, the apprentices, the people who come at the time, for me, have always been head and shoulders above the graduates.
And I think it's clear also looking at BHK, you know, even for relatively small in terms of that side, you've always done very well on the apprentice route and apprenticeship side, and a lot of companies haven't, I guess. I mean, is that something you've worked hard at as well? Yeah,
I mean, obviously I think this is the third lot of apprentices we took on. So the first lot I've took on, but of the first 4 apprentices, One's maintenance manager now.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Two of them are still here.
Yeah.
One's maintenance electrician, one's maintenance mechanical, and one of them's in Nissan. But he still pops in and speaks to everybody. You know, he wasn't looking for a job. We all know the money they pay. You know, I had a clear route for him. We did lots of training with him. This guy was the only guy in site at the time who could program all of the robots. You know, so we had a lot of training, and he didn't really want to go, but he was getting married, you know, kids on the way. It was too good an opportunity for him to leave. So, we do well with apprentices, and I think it's down to the environment. In here, you know, it's not with apprentices. You need to allow them to grow. You need to give them that first year, just following someone around. You know, what we do is we do have them. You've got their own test benches, and we give them, like, on 3 months I want you to be here, 6 months I want you to be here, and so they've got targets within their own heads, but really they're just following people and learning the workplace. And I think in a really, really, really fast-paced environment, which we had when I was at AKS, there's just no time for apprentices to grow, and they just don't end up sticking it out. Yeah. They want a return on their investment straight away, and you know that's not the mindset that we're going with if you're taking on apprentices in 4 years' time. Yeah, but you know they need to be developed.
100%. I think, you know, manufacturing's got some problems, and I think succession planning is one of them. And there's still a lot of companies in my eyes who are too short-sighted about the whole apprenticeships, because they can't afford to wait 4 or 5 years. But if you set yourself, like you say, the process now BHK have got is organic, and you know you'll keep churning really good apprentices, and that's help you culture-wise, your turnover, you know, the budget on recruitment, on training, and everything above. That must make life a lot easier for you, I guess. It's not a conveyor belt of different people.
No, the turnover of staff in here is very low, which again is a testament to the environment here. But I think what I've seen with bringing the apprentices in is they do make a difference to the environment of the workplace, and they do. We've got 2 electrical, mechanical, and they just brighten the place up a bit. You know, they make people think about what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, when maybe if you haven't had, I think we had a couple of years where we didn't have an apprentice, but you think about what you're doing again. You know, and they just, it's hard to describe. You know, they're good lads, and you know they did brighten the whole place up a little bit. But we have, you know, we've got a few guys who are probably going to retire in 3 or 4 years' time, maybe. So we've brought them in now just to give them the time to grow, and when they retire, they'll just naturally, hopefully, fill in their places.
I love that. And I think, like you say, I think everyone's got something in them that they want, even if they're not a manager, they want to train and they want to help and they want to assist. And I think if young people there who are walking around being sponges, and you can have a little tiny lasting effect on their career, I think there's massive satisfaction in that. Huge.
Yeah, I mean, when I approached my MD, Chris, I just said, you know, I think it's time, but I want to do it. You know, what I've gained out of life through the apprenticeship that I was given, I want to give that opportunity back. And he agreed. You know, he said we can't just be taken from a pool all the time, because that pool's not really growing at the moment. Yeah. So let's contribute to it. And I think that the financial side of it, things, and it's a non-starter really. The funding you get from the government for the fees, and then, you know, having the wages that you need to pay them. We pay really good wages for the apprentices. I wanted to make sure that wasn't just the bog standard either. Yeah. So I think the finance thing is just an excuse. But obviously, there's smaller businesses who genuinely can't afford to take them on. But for most SMEs, I don't think it's a stumbling block really, when you think about what you're actually paying out a month. And you know, it doesn't take long to see a little bit of investment on them. You know, they can, for all they're not probably fixing machines and fault finding already. You can have them, the mechanical guys fabricating things, electrical guys starting to wire bits of panels, and yeah, they are contributing.
Yeah. And you probably never sit back and sit down and really think about it, but that must make you proud to have. You mentioned the lads that have gone onto big jobs in Nissan, maintenance manager. You know, you've obviously played a massive part in their career. Yeah. Have you ever sat and thought about the impact that you've had on people like
that? Not really. I think more recently, I mentioned one of the guys here who's maintenance manager. Yeah, I think I've had a good big role, because when I came here, he was just on the shop floor as a technician. And after working with him for about 6 months or so, I realised, this guy could be really, really, really good. Yeah. And him being really, really, really good makes my life a lot easier.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I've worked with him a lot. He went to a shift manager, now to be a maintenance manager.
Yeah.
But we've done it right. I've been in positions where I've been thrusted into management. It's just sink or swim. Fortunately, I've done all right. I've swam and sank it sometimes, but got myself back above water. But yeah. I've given him the right training. Do you know what I mean? I've made sure that he's done his management training now. He's just about finished the management course. I've done him on like one-day workshops of how to manage upwards and how to deal with conflict, how to be more authoritative in the workplace, because that's a hard thing, because he's doing now what I did at AKS. So he's worked with guys on the shop floor. He's been the apprentice here. So him now trying to manage these guys. So I've just tried to give him the tools and work with him. And he's absolutely flying, without doubt, the biggest success story of my career so far. Yeah. So with that instance, probably, yeah. And
you talk about conflict, and I think often in my experience, managers that potentially, not always managers lead from the front, but ones who do as I do, sometimes maybe struggle with the conflict side and the sort of disciplinarian aspect of it. Is that ever been an issue for you? Is that something that you feel, or is that just part of the job?
Not now. It was initially. I think I've been through making people redundant. I've been through dismissals. Been through a lot of disciplinaries. So it's common. It's not common. Sorry, that makes it feel like we're just getting rid of people left, right, and centre. It's not. But I know the process now, and for all I say, I've talked a lot about being a good person and all of this kind of thing. I'm not a pushover, do you know what I mean? I still expect the job to be done, and I can recognise when the job's not being done, when what I'm asking for is not unreasonable and still not being done. And I can see the impact that has on other people, and that's when you've got to take action. So it's the most unpleasant part of the job, but if you don't resolve it, it just makes everything worse for everyone else. Yeah. So, and I think what makes it, I think a lot of the times there was many elements when I've worked elsewhere where I've been involved in disciplinary things that I just didn't agree with at all. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's hard. Yeah. Now I'm obviously a senior manager. If I'm disciplining somebody, it's because I think it's the right thing to do. And that's where I'm fortunate, because you know yourself, if you're in a big part of a big corporation, you can be put in a position where you're asked to do something that you just don't agree with. And I think I'd struggle to go into that type of environment again, to be honest. Yeah. Because I think as you become more experienced, you rely on your morals a little bit. Yeah. And I think when you're younger, that moral compass is easily, because you're not really certain as to what goes on in the workplace. You can be kind of led to do things that maybe you didn't think were right, looking back now. So yeah, I think the disciplinary thing, I think if I think it's the right thing to do, then I've got absolutely no problem with it at all. Because if you've got people who've got bad attitudes, people who aren't pulling the weight, it ultimately it affects the whole place. It drags it down, and the longer you allow it to go on, the worse and worse it gets, and the bigger problem it gets. So things like that, no, I don't enjoy it at all, but I know when it's got to be done, and I do it.
I think in any firm, particularly a small or medium-sized business, it only takes one person, doesn't it? It takes one person to drag it down, and your culture just overnight can ruin.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously I don't want to go into too much, but from experience, you can have one person can totally shatter the communication between manufacturing, between quality, between maintenance. One person can break all of that down. And it really is. People don't want to come in and talk to them. People don't report problems. So therefore, the quality of the machines is getting worse because they're just trying to keep them running because they don't want to talk to somebody in maintenance. And then obviously your quality is getting worse. You're getting more downtime. You're getting less out the door. People just don't want to talk to each other. The atmosphere is down, and all of that could come from one person.
Yeah, It's
And I-
sometimes you don't realize until they're gone. You know, we've had that. We had someone left a while ago, and I didn't realize until the extent until they were gone. It was like, wow, really? You know, why don't you tell me? Do you know what I mean? Like, I thought I should have really known that. I think you've almost got your head in the sand trying to help that person, but actually the negative effect they can have on the rest of the team is monumental. Really is. But it's difficult to see as a manager sometimes because you're just dealing with that issue.
Yeah, without doubt. I think, again, one of the difficult things about management is you have what you're working on day in, day out, and when you're working on bigger projects, you sometimes just lose sight of that a little bit. And I think more recently, the last few months, I've been more back into like the management side of things. And you think, I should have probably picked this up a while ago. So there's that time of reflection where you realise you've made mistakes sometimes, isn't it?
And for BHK now, then obviously, you know, doing well. What's the next few years looking like? Big plans?
Yeah, I mean, we are heavily focused in terms of the business. It's just continually grown and has done since I started. So we're healthy. But what we are doing is, when I first came here, we were heavily based. Sorry, my role was to implement as much automation as possible. Because a lot of the jobs were just basically loading boards. People were off sick because it was heavy work. You had a lot of agency staff in, and it just wasn't really an efficient way of running. And we had a lot of guys coming up to retirement age who'd been here 20 and 30 years who were ready to retire. So we were gearing up to manage that change. So we got through that. That was the first 2.5 years. We put 4 robot cells in. Most of the machines are automatically loaded and unloaded. And all along, what we've been trying to do, which is something in businesses again that I see miss, you get drawn into all the bells and whistles and all the fancy things, and you kind of neglect the foundations a little bit. Now we haven't done that as such, so we kind of analysed what are our biggest problem machines, but that are also fundamental machines that we need. We rectified those issues, but really now what we're getting to is, obviously with the electricity prices and everything going up, we really looking everywhere in the business at how we save energy, how we become more efficient. So that's really what we're focusing on at the moment, and we're doing a really good job at the moment on energy reduction. We're putting solar panels on the whole of our roof's going to be covered in solar panels, hopefully subject to planning permission and all of that. We're doing a job at the moment, so our whole factory is covered in extraction for the wood dust. And they're all just an old style drive, on-off star delta control. We've put inverters on them, slowing them all down. At the moment, from November, we're saving about 2,000 kilowatt hours a day, which a lot of companies probably won't even consume. About 50,000 kilowatt hours a month, which at the moment's working out about 8 to 10 grand a month. So we really reducing the carbon footprint, not at all motivated by the cost savings.
But it is. I think that's every business needs to go that way. I think they're starting to, but it needs to.
I think as I've started to look at it and start to see, like this is the surface stuff that I've hit. I haven't had to go into a lot of research to figure out what we need to do. I'm just scratching the surface. And obviously your biggest wins you hit first, but I think to myself, the amount of businesses that are probably our size that have no idea, how, if you've got a bit of know-how, how easy it actually is to begin to make some good savings. And I think that'll be key to the survival of a lot of businesses over the next couple of years. Electricity prices are going to go through the roof. They're really going to keep getting higher, which they always do. But I think a lot of businesses probably are, but if they're not, they need to be focusing on how they cut the costs.
Completely agree.
That's pretty much where we're focused on. Our businesses, we're taking in a lot of business, because I don't think there's many companies who can do what we do at the scale that what we do. So we focus on a lot on now. We build a lot of the machines ourselves that we need to suit ourselves. So rather than spending £200,000-300,000 on a machine, might buy a smaller one and then we'll just expand it and make it all much bigger, which is what we do. we build them, design them, and test them in our workshop, and then we put them out on the shop floor. And overall, the price of what we put out there to what we were quoted for a new machine is about a fifth.
That's amazing training for you guys, for your staff as well to get involved in that.
Yeah. I mean, so the machines, and it's the same with the robot cells as well. So we totally from scratch, we designed them. We go through all the means, change them, get to where production want them. We then build them in the workshop and then start to test them, and then we realize we need to change this, we need to change that. We get the finished product in the workshop, and then so we know how everything goes together. We know how it all works. We make an installation plan. We put them in. Within a week, it's in there working on the shop floor. So we do that with the robot cells. We know what we're doing with them now. We've built quite a few. We do all the CE mark and technical folders we do internally. So we do all of that, and then from that we kind of start to build a bit of confidence that we can. I'm not say anything, we can't put men on the moon, but I think through being able to do that, then we decided, right, shall we have a crack at trying to build our own driller machine, So we've now built and installed a machine that saws, drills, cuts, finishes, and it does everything. And it was a fifth of the price of what we were quoted for a new one. And that's allowed us to take on a lot more business without working any overtime. So that's obviously been a big help for the business. So that's what we're doing. We look at what machines do we need? Can we build them in-house? When we do it, how do we create a solid foundation? So the machines that we're always falling over, how do we stop that? And then how do we, reduce the bottom line? How do we create savings and reduce waste? So yeah, that's our goal going forward. Get more out of what we've got. Reduce waste, reduce energy consumptions, and increase automation. And that's what we've done essentially for 3 years, and it's really we're starting to see the dividends from that. Yeah.
Love it. Excellent stuff. Right. Well, a few final questions, mate. But Joe, so for you, Sam, what are the 3 things that make a good leader? No notes.
Drive. You've got to be driven. You cannot lead people if you are not driven to achieve a certain task, or you have a certain goal in mind. If you're not driven, if you're not coming in and pushing on every day, there's just no point doing it. This is probably a bit left field. I would say emotional intelligence is key to being a manager, because more so now, more than ever, I would say, there's not only is there not one management style. You need a different management style for a different person, but in some instances you might need a different management for a different person on a different day. You need to be able to gauge. I mean, sometimes you need to get the job done, so it's getting done no matter what. But there are ways and means of going around it, and sometimes you need to be able to gauge who you're dealing with, what frame of mind are they in, how do you get the best out of them, and how you got the best out of them yesterday isn't necessarily how you get the best out of them today. And I think not taking a blanket approach to everything and saying this is how I manage, this is how it's going to be, like it or lump it. I think by just tailoring your approach each day because as well, I deal with contractors all the time, I deal with different people all the time. So you just got to be able to kind of just observe them, observe the situation, and then kind of move forward, kind of see how you're going to approach things from gauging all of that. I think that's a really important part of it, mate, to be a very good manager, and to not just, because a lot of good managers will just continuously hit targets, and yeah, that's a great manager, but if you want to develop the team and the people as well, I think that you need to have that strong level of emotional intelligence.
Completely agree. We did some training actually. We're getting the next one. We had some of our clients in last week. We had a specialist we know who specialised in emotional intelligence, and he came and delivered a workshop, and it was the first time I've really delved properly into it, and it was fascinating for that exact. I've read books on it. I've read the classic books, the Timbit Paradox, that type of stuff. But to actually to workshop it and understand it, it was a scenario where we had to think about how we dealt with the situation and what was the outcome, and if we could, how we wish we dealt with it, and what could the outcome have been. And it's it's really, really fascinating, but an absolute must for managers.
Yeah, totally agree. I think I've learned from good managers. I've learned as much from bad managers as I have from good managers.
Absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
if not more.
Yeah.
And I'd say that the one thing that always stood out with the bad managers was just not being able to deal with people and not having that. You know, we sit on the table and you can think about, like, you're trying to get something out of someone. You can see that they may be struggling or whatever, and I could see it.
Yeah.
And you can see what the problem is, but other people will just still hammer away at them. You just make it worse. And yeah, I think just that lack of empathy and that lack of having any awareness of what's going on was the downfall of most of the bad managers that I've seen.
Yeah, I completely agree massively. I think, like you say, you learn so much from the bad managers, the much you do the good ones.
Oh yeah.
You know what it feels like to receive that level of management, and
yeah,
never leaves you. So no,
yeah.
I completely agree. Was that three? So 3, yeah, wasn't it?
No.
Yeah, I jumped in.
Good communication. You've got to be able to communicate across all levels with everybody, because I think if you do exit interviews, if you listen to people who've left the jobs, people who it's always bad managers, bad communication, no idea what's going on. And again, it never has to be. I'm not one for huge complicated systems. You know, the guys that I work with, they don't like using computers a lot, you know. So we have boards, we have the plan schedule up there. I have it all on my computer, but they don't like to use it that way. So we have computers, we just have it on the board out there. This is what we're working on at the moment. So we have the PBMs. We'll have a list of jobs, remedial works from PBMs that need to be done, so they can just work through them, see what machines are running. And then the other one is we just have the general, like the bigger automation projects that we're working on. And we'll have an automation plan for the year. This is what we're doing this month, then. So they've got an overview of what's happening for the year. They know what PBMs need to be done. They know what they need done on a daily basis. And we are going to migrate that into a system. Our manager, our MD, Chris, again, he's. I should have mentioned Chris when I saw what great managers actually.
You've just got over time, yeah.
Yeah, no, this is without probably the most intelligent man I've ever met, and allows me to do my job. Just gives me that freedom and the support there on it, which is great. But he's an incredible accountant, but he's also a computer programmer. So he's wrote our planning system that we use on site, which is like totally transformed how everything happens. But he's also wrote a maintenance system as well. So we are going to very, very, very slowly try to get the guy, but we are going to put it in and then just kind of drip feed it with the guys. But yeah, communication, going back to your point, that's
100%.
key. Yeah.
And going back to first day of managing people, I guess, like you say, managing a team, knowing what you know now, what the advice would you give yourself on that day, do you think?
Just have a bit more faith in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Trust yourself. Yeah, I think looking back now, you're in that position for a reason. You've been put there because you're good at what you do. Don't doubt yourself as much.
Yeah,
a bit more confidence.
Excellent. And just finally, I mean, look, the purpose of this podcast is to help managers, but it's also to help manufacturing, something I'm really passionate about. And we've already kind of touched upon it, what PHK are doing there with the sustainable energy side. But how do you think we start to improve the manufacturing and I guess the future of manufacturing as a whole, would you say?
Obviously, I mentioned the automation is key. I think to enable like the business to be sustainable, energy savings as well. But I think what we're going to see more and more of now, possibly due to Brexit, possibly due to COVID, but I think as well from an energy saving point of view, I think the more UK-based manufacturing, the less globalization. As I think for me, it's not just how we help UK manufacturing, but it's one of the, for me, it's when we talk about the climate crisis, it's globalization. That's the problem. Yeah. Shipping things from South America to be packed in China to be eaten over here. I think the more we get back to producing locally where we can, I think that's how we do it. But obviously, we need businesses that are sustainable to do that. And that's where your automation, your energy savings, and all of this things kind of type of thing come in.
I think you're right. I think with Brexit code, whatever, I think that onshoring has been a big aspect of it, and the disruption we've had in supply chains. You look at automotive, the semiconductor, and all that sort of stuff. I think, like you say, the less complicated approach manufacturers are going to have to that will massively make a big dent in the P&L for sure. That.
I think hopefully, I mean, I don't know, I don't run a multinational corporation, but surely there's throughout the whole COVID, when everything just stopped, you realise that it's not sustainable.
No, yeah, it is.
We look at the impact it's having in the environment. I'm less globalization. That's the answer for me. Obviously, how you do that, I don't know. But trying to just get as much as we can, produce locally, European stuff like that, and then creating the businesses that are more sustainable from the ground up. That's how we do it, in my opinion. It's not something I've thought about massively actually until we've had a discussion, but yeah, that's what I would say. Probably that would be my answer.
It's just to think about. Yeah, completely agree. Look, Sam, I've really enjoyed it, mate, and I've learned a lot. And I think I love the fact that you've got into on the management side, that not everything needs to be complicated sometimes. Like you say, you trust yourself, you trust your process, you have a level of good level of emotional intelligence, and just understand people and work with them. Then the rest, should be relatively easy. If you stick to the process. I really enjoyed the chat around apprenticeships and sustainable energy, because I just think that's going to really make stuff that can help firms and help them grow for future wise. So we enjoy it. Thanks, mate.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it. It was good to catch up, Mark.